Good job. One of us is paying attention here.
Well, hello there, everyone. Me and Steven were actually having some discussion as to whether or not we should have any pre-show banter, some conversation, anything like that. Give you a little glimpse of our lives, but we've decided against it.
Decided against it, yeah.
Firm no. Nah, we already chatted. We've already got that all out of the way.
Yep.
So, welcome everyone to Kaijusaurus. My name is Roz Menzies, and this
is Steven Sloss, a Kaiju fan of 15 years.
And I am a Kaiju fan of 0 years? A couple of months. So what we're doing, each episode, we go through each and every films of the official Godzilla canon.
Yes, indeed.
And we're just seeing what happens. We're having a wee conversation about each one.
Yes, with different perspectives, myself as a lifelong fan and Ross as practically a blank slate.
Exactly, tabula rasa. As always, guys, we enjoy that you listen to us, and anything you want to ask us about the next film that we come, if you want to know what I'm going to think, or you have specific questions you want to ask, please do. And always let us know what you think, because it's really great, and it just helps us get better at what we do.
It does indeed. So this week, we have just finished watching King Kong vs. Godzilla, having just come off the back of Godzilla Raids Again in our last episode together. This film, as people listening to this should know, was produced in 1962 and is the first Godzilla film in colour, it's the first King Kong film in colour, and it's the first film for both monsters in widescreen. 7 years after Godzilla Raids Again. You want to fire into this, Ross?
Well, first of all, the question on everyone's lips. How? Why? What? Hey, explain the film. How did this happen?
Well, I'm so glad you asked.
He's just opened the book.
To answer this question, we have to go back to the beginning. The very beginning. With Willis O'Brien, legendary stop-motion animator on the original 1933 King Kong. So,
which I have seen.
You have seen?
I have seen.
Which this film unfortunately doesn't follow. But anyway, Willis O'Brien was a man who, while leaving a really amazing legacy in cinema and especially in special effects, his career was also marked by what he didn't achieve and the projects he attempted to get off the ground that just didn't work. Mm-hmm. So after King Kong, he's tried for a while to get several projects up and running. The Valley of Mist and War Eagles, those both being pulled by RKO at the last second. So eventually he's getting fed up. He writes a treatment for a sequel to King Kong, alternatively titled King Kong vs. the Ginkgo, King Kong vs. Prometheus, or King Kong vs. Frankenstein.
Excellent.
Which would see Carl Denham bringing King Kong to San Francisco, where Kong clashes with a monster created by the grandson of Dr. Frankenstein. A giant monster stitched together from different animal parts, etc. And these King Kong and the Ginkgo, as it's referred to in the screenplay, would clash in San Francisco on the Golden Gate Bridge, and the film would have ended with both monsters falling into the bay. So Willis O'Brien shops this project around a lot of studios, and for some reason they're not interested.
For some reason.
Because I mean, honestly, this is one of these films that I will never stop lamenting the lack of. Despite what came of it, I will always lament this film not existing.
Yeah, what could have been.
Yeah. So Willis O'Brien attracts the attention of a producer by the name of John Beck.
Mm-hmm. Should he ring a bell?
No, he shouldn't. Not really, no. He seems fairly unprolific. So basically, Beck buys the project and the screenplay off of Willis O'Brien, removes him from the project.
Oh no, that's awful.
Yeah. Removes Willis O'Brien from his own project.
That's a bummer.
Yeah. And Beck starts trying to shop it around. No one in the US is interested.
Bloody Beck.
Yeah. So if no one in the US is interested, he takes it. Our friend Beck, our man Beck, finds himself at the gates of Toho. Pitches the project to producer Tomoyuki Tanaka, who produced Godzilla, and Godzilla Raids Again, and Rodan, and The Mysterians, and Very the Unbelievable, and Mothra, and many, many, many other non-genre films as well. Toho pick up the project, replace the Frankenstein monster, the Ginkgo, with Godzilla.
Slot him right in there.
RKO, for some reason, steps in now and provides the rights to King Kong.
Well, there you go.
And here we
are. Well, here we are indeed. Should I just get going? Should I just unravel? Or is there more?
No, feel free. Go ahead. All I was going to say more is that Toho produces the film, retains rights to distribute the film in Japan, and Universal, RKO, which would then become or be owned by Universal, co-produced the film and would retain worldwide distribution rights, and that is still in place today.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, there we go.
It's really strange.
Well, so you mentioned just before we started watching it that there's a lot of returning crew. At
Yes,
least.
indeed, on Toho's side.
So director Ishiro Honda, he's back.
Director Ishiro Honda is back from the original.
Composer
Akira Ifukube is
from
back.
the original.
Yes, indeed.
This is my first tangent. The theme for... No, I'm actually going to leave this for now. I'll talk about it later. So...
Akira Ifukube.
Composer. Anyone else?
It's the first Godzilla film for a writer called Shinichi Sekizawa, who you'll have no doubt noticed a bit of a tonal shift in this film. He moved Toho's Kaiju films into a more fantasy-based realm.
Absolutely.
And they were a bit lighter and they had comic relief and this kind of thing. And
Which is something that
they weren't as cynical, basically.
No, absolutely not. That's something I really want to talk about with this film, because I really actually did enjoy Godzilla vs. King Kong. I thought it was great. There are obviously some great big gaping problems with this film.
Kong.
Blackface. There are multiple things that don't sit right for me with this film, but on the whole, it's something that I can enjoy.
Oh god, yeah.
And right from the start, widescreen, full colour, and it is just it's so engaging, and right off the bat, it feels like really energetic. Something that Godzilla Raids Again didn't feel like.
Yeah, no, exactly.
If anything, I could argue that Godzilla Raids Again felt like a little bit of a slump. I think Godzilla Raids Again was a good film. I really do.
No, I agree.
But it's just not as energetic. It's not as lively.
Exactly, yeah.
If you want to say anything about this film, you can at least argue that it has an energy about it.
No, exactly. I totally agree with you with the opening, because opens with the blue screen saying, celebrating 30 years of Toho, and then the golden shimmering Tohoscope logo flares onto the screen, and accompanied by the big blaring Ifukube. And it's like, oh yes, Godzilla's back after 7 years. It thunders back onto the screen.
It totally does. And then we go into that sort of fake out opening with the Earth, and you're thinking, wait, what's going on? Are we getting like a vaguely apocalyptic sci-fi description of the Earth right onto this science fiction show, and then suddenly throws us, much like they do with the original Godzilla, which I always said I liked, with throwing us into another bit of slice of life with this pharmaceutical company advertising
Pacific Pharmaceuticals.
Basically, this entire plot and these sets of characters and this company, I think I am in love with. I love that concept. I love strange little companies. I love those two TV directors that just run around this movie, just screwing everything over. The boss,
Mr. Taco.
Mr. Taco is an absolutely wonderful comic creation, and totally indicative of this sort of change in tone that we were talking about.
Yeah, but exactly. I mean, by this point, Toho were most prolific for comedies. That comedies comprised, I think, around 30% of their output. Especially they had their other big franchise aside from Godzilla and Kaiju was a series called The Crazy Cats.
Oh.
Like a really long-running comedy series. And so this film is indicative of what stage Toho were at with the emphasis on comedy, because this is something that's really, really lost on a lot of people. And in the US version, which I will go
Right,
on to,
yeah, we'll talk about that.
is that this film is intended as a comedy.
Oh, absolutely.
As like a satirical comedy.
Yeah, it's like, I can't imagine watching this film and thinking it's unintentionally funny, going, oh, this movie's like, oh, it's so ridiculous. Because the thing that I do appreciate is, yeah, it's a comedy, and I don't think that's a bad thing at all, and I don't think that cheapens Godzilla at all, or at least so far to do a Godzilla
to lighten the subject.
Because here's the thing, you've got so many Godzilla films, and it's a broad church. The first one was this sort of overarching huge tragedy.
Exactly.
The second one was a sort of much starker, little, almost like war piece, tactical, very tactical. So we've got lots of options for what to do with more Godzilla films. I mean, so yeah, let's make a satire. Let's make a comedy.
This film does almost play out like a caper.
It really does.
Like just this little group of characters who really shouldn't be in this situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Just continually finding themselves in increasingly like ridiculous and dire situations that they're not really like equipped for.
Exactly. Well, that's the thing. I was thinking this as I watched it. Our two sort of main characters, the two TV directors, the two ad guys.
Yeah, Sakurai and Kinsaburo. Yeah.
They are absolutely unequipped to deal with what's going on. If you
for some reason, they're chosen to go on the island.
Yeah, exactly. Compare the credentials to the characters from the first and second films, who, well, not all military officials or doctors like Dr. Sarazawa, at least were, for example, avid sailors or like experienced sailors in the case of one of the characters from the second film, or soldiers, or fighter pilots, all at least vaguely skilled, trained individuals. And that's the thing. The two things I appreciated with the very early scenes of Godzilla versus King Kong is, first of all, it feels very modern. The characters feel much more modern, and that's not just because it's in colour. Like, we're getting modern day, almost just modern TV executives. We're at a TV studio. These are young, like, characters that live in Tokyo. They're like young. They have dinner together. They have steak and fries, and it's quite lively chat. And I really enjoyed that scene. Yeah, so they have dinner together and play with the really stretchy. The
really strong
wire that never returns to the film. And he does that ridiculous thing off the balcony.
They use it to airlift Kong.
Oh, is that what they use?
Yeah.
Right. Well, that makes sense.
For some reason, though, it's this only clicked while watching it this time. I don't know how many times I've seen this film. Why did they have to set that up? Why, in a story of this nature, why do they think that the one thing the audience isn't going to buy is like a wire or a rope strong enough to lift Kong? Because I would have just thought, like,
it's the military. They introduced the agency.
Yeah, let's just get some like really, really thick, strong rope. But they feel the need to establish this super scientific, strong wire at the start.
That one guy just has. And just shows up at a military operation and goes, oh, by the way, guys, I've got apparently an endless amount of this cable, should we need it. So just hit me up if you do. Anyway, that was a tangent. I do want to talk about the other thing. So, sort of, it felt very modern, felt very, especially with the characters were concerned, but the comedy actually is so intentional and so well done. I think Ishiro Honda's directing, even in that first scene with the boss, the comic directing, the comic acting, the timing, the way it's shot is just really, really funny. Especially, like, anytime that boss is on screen, I was pissing myself. Because it's just so well done, and I think that is an appropriate angle with which to approach Godzilla. And you're talking about other things. You're talking about real issues. We're talking about the sort of media spectacle of things like Godzilla and things like King Kong. We're talking about pharmaceutical companies and their sort of role in modern world and what they're doing there. We are approaching issues much in the way that the original Godzilla did, and slightly different issues now that we're in the 60s, but
in a much lighter way.
In a much lighter way, which is fine.
Exactly.
And it changes things up and it keeps things varied. I don't know if I could have stomached a third very grim lurch into tragedy. I think jumping into
because there's comedy. None of that in this film. There's really none at all.
Not particularly.
Which is fine.
Which is fine.
Like I think I said in the first episode when we reviewed the original Godzilla, you couldn't have built a franchise and kept that tone.
No, exactly. Like, that's the thing. You can't build a franchise around the one film and keep replicating the one film. The whole reason it's a franchise is that it's different.
Exactly,
films.
and the Godzilla series is very tonally rich, as you will find out.
And it's a testament to any modern franchise that the key to surviving A and B, making money, is to do different films.
Yeah.
Make each of those films slightly different and worth seeing.
Yeah.
Not talking to anyone in particular. Well, I guess we should just start sort of rattling through the film, or at least the broad points of the film. So,
Yeah, no, that's fine with me. You mentioned Pacific Pharmaceuticals, and just like how funny you found their kind of office scenes.
Yeah, like
the ridiculous boss, played by Ichiro Arishima, who, as you could probably tell, is like a really big comedy actor in Japan at the time, and
who would have known?
Kind of sort of known as like a Japanese Groucho Marx. Even down to his look is kind of
totally, the mustache.
Yeah, and the glasses and and the scenes in the pharmaceutical office are kind of similar to films, Japanese comedy films referred to as salaryman films, which are basically workplace comedies.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Yeah, like office-based comedies and that sort of thing.
To jump very quickly back, I felt very comfortable watching those scenes. Going from Godzilla to Godzilla Raids Again to Godzilla versus King Kong. It felt very comfortable to jump into sort of this slice of life office scene and scenes centered around the office and conversation and just normal people, which was nice because it just made me think back of the original Godzilla and how many scenes of that there were. But yeah, carry on.
Yep, so Pacific Pharmaceuticals are funding a scientific TV show. All about the wonders of the Wonderful World series. It's called.
Exactly.
All about the wonders of science and what's going on in the field of science today.
Science.
But Mr. Taco, the chief, the boss, whatever.
Or he's the head of the advertising side of the company.
Of Pacific Pharmaceuticals is unhappy because this is boring. It's getting 5% of the ratings. I mean, in those days it was like 3 channels or something.
Exactly. So that's pretty dreadful.
So he's getting annoyed. So he tasks Sakurai, played by Tadao Takashima, and Kinsaburo, played by Yu Fujiku, to find something new, to find something to really boost the show's ratings. So they meet a professor who has just returned from Faroe Island and has brought home some red berries with him. And he claims that maybe there's a monster there that the natives worship as a god.
Oh.
So that old chestnut.
That one.
So naturally, Sakurai and Kinsaburo are sent off to Faroe Island, complete with pith helmets and hunting rifles, and it looks like really not much else.
And we know where that's going.
So they arrive on Faroe Island, and, well, let's put it this way, folks. It really wouldn't be a King Kong film if it didn't have some offensively racist natives.
Exactly. Like, I am not going to be the guy that goes, "Oh, it was the 60s, it was fine." Nah,
it was wrong then, and it's wrong
dreadful.
now.
It's pretty dreadful, guys.
It's literally just Japanese extras and actors in brownface. It's just, and it's, I dread to use the term "it's not even good brownface" because there's no such thing. It's not even good makeup. It's around the eyes especially. It's not. It's coming off.
Yeah, the neck, like, it's not very well done on the neck. And so those scenes are obviously just have a weird cloud over them because there's just so.
Exactly. I mentioned this in the Mothra podcast, which you weren't here for, which also features something very similar.
Yeah.
Mothra features something similar. I meant. I'm not a great believer in the technical side of things dating a film. It's the contents of films that date them.
Yeah.
And this sort of thing especially
sends it way back.
Is a product of its time, and that is not an excuse.
Yeah, exactly.
It's wrong then and it's wrong now, and this really dates the film.
It really does. And
then what do they do to make peace with the natives? First of all, Sakurai gives the chief a transistor radio.
Yeah.
A ticket to the whole world. And then what do they do, Ross?
What do they do next? Well, some nice old-fashioned friendly cigarettes are shared.
Our friend tobacco.
No, like this. Yeah, so this whole sequence is obviously the connotations there of just giving the natives the wonders of the sort of
civilization.
Yeah. And it's very ridiculous. But I will say, the sight of those 50 extras all puffing on cigarettes was quite ridiculous.
It's funny,
quite funny. Yeah.
Like, it's funny because of just how strange it is.
Yeah.
Because I said to you, look at them all in the background. They're all lighting up, and they're all like lighting up each other's cigarettes, and it's really funny because it's just so strange. The aesthetic clash is just so deep and hurtful.
Well, yeah, no, because that's the thing as well, is that they are clearly trying to make some points there about, ooh, those cigarettes, and no, got that. Well, no, it's at this point that you can feel the film trying to make some more points, trying to maybe hit out tobacco a little bit, and obviously because we're a pharmaceutical company, we are now within the film talking about the sort of like overarching reach of pharmaceutical companies, sort of sending and forcing their medicine out on the world, like, and on countries that may not have had it or had use for it
or need it.
Yeah, exactly. So a point is coming up there, but it really is just such a strange scene, and that whole sort of as I say, it's a strange scene that sort of makes the entire early King Kong section kind of weird.
It makes it slightly uncomfortable. It doesn't stop the film in its tracks.
Oh, not at all, no.
But it's just, I mean, I kind of prepared you for it a little
bit.
But when you watch it, you just kind of go, oh,
exactly.
God.
And it's, as I say, it's something that's worth addressing as we talk about it.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think I'm glad we talked about it there.
Yeah. So, as with any natives in any Kong film, they are worshipping a creature called Kong.
Who shows up
in the midst of a giant octopus attack.
The octopus was the fleshy beast.
Yeah,
that was very cool. I thought most of that, especially the early octopus battle, was really cool, and I realised that is just because they put an octopus,
because it was a real octopus,
in front of some models.
Do you want a story about their octopus?
I absolutely do want a story about the octopus.
Well, for the real octopus, apparently they had 4 real octopi that they used. 3 were released back into the wild. The 4th one became special effects director Eiji Tsuburaya's dinner.
Oh my goodness. That night?
I guess so, yeah.
Man.
Apparently he cooked it and ate it for his team.
Well, there we go. Pain is temporary, film is forever. That quote actually doesn't really have any relevance to that. It doesn't really work, but I thought I'd say it. But yeah, no, so King Kong fights an octopus, which sort of shows us King Kong's strong. He can fight an octopus. Sort of, I guess, shows us he protects his little village. He cares about them.
I suppose he does, yeah. I don't really know why they bothered constructing that wall and the fence to keep Kong out, because it's not very useful, is it?
No, it really isn't. Well, I guess first of all, now that Kong showed up, we should talk about Kong.
We should talk about
how we see him.
In the middle of the film, during a break, I said to Ross that the Kong suit and the Kong puppet is just the overall portrayal of Kong is the one big thing that really lets this film down. And I've been wrestling with this I first saw this film maybe around 13 years ago. And I've been wrestling with this the entire time this film's been a part of my life, and
the entire time I've known you.
Yeah, essentially, I've been wrestling with this inner demon, and it keeps me up at night thinking about how awful the Kong suit is. But it's
pretty bad.
I have no excuses for this. I've seen people try and defend it, and I'm sorry, I don't agree. I know Toho, even before this film, were capable of so much better and could have done better, and it's just, I don't know what went wrong. It's just awful.
That's the thing, because they film, there's so many shots of the Kong suit, so many close-ups of Kong's face, all from this really low angle, like chin first, and it just looks so bad. If they'd shot it from a little bit higher above, it probably would have just looked it would have made a difference. It
Yeah.
genuinely would have, because there's so many shots where we just see him from down low. He's got like 3 chins. And you just see the costume not really working. And I feel okay to criticise the Kong costume here, because I think, or at least of the 3 films I've seen so far, I think Godzilla looks the best I've seen him.
Oh, in this film,
I actually really liked how Godzilla looked. I really loved the scene where Godzilla emerges, when we are rushing ahead in the synopsis, but when Godzilla emerges from the iceberg and attacks a random military base.
Yeah.
The model work there is superb.
Oh, it's lovely, isn't it?
Perfect, yeah, like the tanks going through that tunnel. I think everything there looks absolutely wonderful, and Godzilla himself looked great.
And you're right. But how good Godzilla looks just emphasises how shit Kong looks.
Yeah, exactly.
The puppet especially is awful, because the suit is a fucking flea bag.
Exactly.
But it can get away with it in some wide shots and that sort of thing. But the puppet is always used for close-ups, and it's atrocious. It's absolutely atrocious. It has this long, protruding snout of a mouth,
and just those really ridiculous eyes that sort of dart about and like open suddenly,
and a really weirdly shaped head with a little kind of dome chrome. It looks like a bald man. And the thing with Kong in this film, though, is that I think he looks more like a chimp than a gorilla. He looks more like a chimpanzee.
They got a key fact wrong here. It's clear.
Just went on Google Images and typed in monkey.
Exactly. Well, the thing that made me sort of really enjoy the Kong costume that I just did in my head, and we laughed about this as we watched the film, but see, and listeners at home, rewatch King Kong versus Godzilla, and just imagine that King Kong is just a really drunk guy just for the whole film, and he essentially is, because whatever's in those red berries knocks him unconscious and gets him really
when after he's defeated the giant octopus, he notices some huge vases full of the red berry liquid and thinks, down the hatch,
guzzling down.
Has I think 4 or 5 pints.
Yeah,
and
we get a very nice Coca-Cola money shot where he drinks the red juice, and I think he sort of he kind of looks to the camera and a sort of, hey, try it, it's great. And this is a film all about advertising, so it makes sense.
And from this point on, Kong is just plastered to the rest of the film.
Yeah, exactly. He's absolutely muntered.
It comes to a head when, again, we're skipping ahead, but when he is in Tokyo and he's got Fumiko in his hand, and he climbs the diet building, and he climbs it in such a haphazardly way, and it's just so awkward and clumsy that it's like he's going, hey guys, I bet I can climb this thing.
Yeah, he looks like your really drunk friend that's trying to like stand on a bin.
And we're all standing around encouraging him to get down.
Come on, get down. But he at one point kind of trips over and sort of lands with his back. He lands bum first in front of the Japanese Parliament building, and a sort of, I'll just sit down here. I'll just have a wee lie down. Don't wake me up.
And then passes out.
Because of the red berry juice.
So yes, but we digress. In Faroe Island, so
basically
Sakurai and Kinsaburo, yes, say, okay, let's build a raft and get Kong.
Yeah.
And the transportation of Kong in really any version of King Kong except for the 76 version is one of these little blips in a film that you just...
How did they do that?
You just... They have to ignore it in order for the wider story to work, and that's fine. In the original King Kong, it's never explained how, they built a raft and got him on... Like, they built a raft, let alone how did they get him onto the raft.
Yeah.
Same with this film and with Peter Jackson's Kong.
You mentioned the 70s one there. How do they explain it, or do they just leave it blank?
In the 70s one, you see him in the hull of a boat.
Right, okay.
A big ship.
So they at least acknowledge
it.
The way they did that is very haphazard. He's just on a little raft, sort of tied down. But they've got the explosives, so it's
they've
fine.
Just built, yeah.
And the little comic scene there between the two guys and
Mr. Taco,
and Mr. Taco, is really funny there when they almost blow up Godzilla. Almost blow up King Kong. Meanwhile, essentially, in what is a B plot, Godzilla breaks out of the ice, messes up some military bases, and sort of wanders back to Japan.
Yeah, and it's inferred that he's kind of homing to an extent, or he's going back from whence he came.
Yeah, because we get that really nice scene, because this is where they introduce, very strangely, the agency.
It just says agency.
The agency. And that's the return of
Akihiko Hirata, not this time playing Serizawa, who of course perished in the first film, but in this he's playing Premier Shigezawa, who seems... I'm not quite sure what his position is. I don't totally know what Premier means. Maybe showing my ignorance.
Premier, well, I know that they have a Prime Minister as well, because they mentioned that in the subtitles, but Premier is... he's up there. That's all we need to know.
He's in the situation for a reason, he's qualified. But yeah, he just seems to be advising people what to do and not really doing it very well.
Well, because I actually really liked his character, especially in the scene where he's introduced speaking to the press and getting into the car. And throughout the film, his character sort of is ruminating very philosophically and very, very serenely about Godzilla. He's very patient. He explains, well, I think Godzilla's coming back. He says he believes that Godzilla's coming back to Japan because that's almost his home.
Yes.
He makes a lot of comments about the sort of nature of Godzilla and the nature of King Kong. And at the end of the film, in a very throwaway line, he literally spouts out one of the moral messages of the film, which is something like, yeah, I guess we should treat animals and plants with more respect. Okay, bye, I need to go.
And that's in this first scene too, when he's talking to the journalist. Well, this is going to happen. Goodbye.
Exactly. And no, I actually thought that was a really great character, and that's the thing. We're back in under Ishiro Honda's here's the thing. Back with Ishiro Honda, all these small characters have an energy to them. They all have character. They all have details that make me interested. In what they're saying and what they're doing. And even if it is a character who we don't learn the name of, or is only there to fulfill a small role, or to utter a few throwaway lines, there's a character there. There's an actual sense of person. So the agency official there is really fun to watch. And this is a complete tangent, but if I was doing an American remake now, Kyle MacLachlan.
Okay, I can see that.
But I don't know where I'm going with there.
No, I can see that.
I don't know, Stephen. So we begin to coalesce, Godzilla making his way further across Japan. King Kong breaks off the ship.
Yes, indeed, he does.
Wanders onto the mainland as well. And we sort of get the sense that these two forces are going to be coalescing. Now, this is the point where the Japanese military is attempting to trap Godzilla. And this was fun to watch as well, because it was nice. You mentioned earlier that we're sort of maybe seeing with this film is marking a shift in the Godzilla franchise towards a little bit more science fiction. And the military tactics in this film absolutely echo that. We have the attempt to absolutely electrocute Godzilla, to drop him into a giant pit.
Dig a big pit.
Dig a big pit, then disguise the huge pit with earth so that he'll walk right into it. And later on we have the astounding balloon trick. So we have, and then in the Japanese countryside we have a brief skirmish between Godzilla and King Kong, round one. And first of all, what I want to say, I really enjoyed this early fight, because it was nice to have the sort of our first monster scene, monsters wreaking havoc in the countryside. In the first two films, mostly we've been seeing Godzilla and the monsters begin on very rural islands before moving out to Tokyo, destroying huge central cities. So it was nice to have these guys sort of ruffle about in the Japanese countryside, and later on the Tokyo suburbs. So it's nice, just genuinely nice to have a little bit change of scenery there.
I agree, but going back to that first skirmish, I even like how it's visually framed and how it's staged, because you have Godzilla on the literal high ground. Godzilla's on a little cliffside looking down onto Kong. And so Kong is almost literally the underdog.
Exactly.
And they acknowledge that Kong is way underpowered.
Yeah,
to
compared
fight
to Godzilla.
Godzilla, yeah.
And well, the thing I like is that in the run-up to King Kong and Godzilla's fight, we have a sort of, and I'm trying to think the best way to explain this, but it's a sort of fight between the sort of media's perception of Godzilla versus King Kong, because the sort of, what the pharmaceutical guys are trying to do is use King Kong as a sort of,
They keep saying spokesperson.
yeah, and use King Kong against Godzilla. They're tired of seeing Godzilla in the papers and the news, so they're going to bring a new monster in that they can use to push Godzilla out of the news. Essentially, so you have a battle for, the
Media supremacy, yeah.
and then you have a battle for monster supremacy.
I even love those little scenes, by the way, like where we get hints at a larger battle in the media, like, oh, there's even a movie in the works.
Exactly. That I love.
And there's a little conversation like, oh, is your family involved in this? No, but I've got a bet on who wins.
Exactly. Well, no, that's what I mean. It's nice to go from Godzilla raids again, and now to Godzilla versus King Kong, or King Kong versus Godzilla. I think I've had it round the wrong way.
I didn't want to correct you. But.
Well, that's fine. Thank you, I do appreciate that. You just embarrassed me in front of all these listeners. But no, it's nice to see that progression of Godzilla in the sort of natural cultural understanding, and just how now by the third film people are very used to the idea that Godzilla is going to come out the water.
Yeah, that these monsters exist and that they will come to Tokyo.
Yeah, it's no longer a shock. It's about as normal as a tornado warning.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, going back to that fight, I have nothing more to say
No, I
about
don't
it.
think I do either,
Yeah,
go back to that fight. It's really there's some really funny parts in that too, like when Mr. Taco and the pharmaceutical squad are trying to get in amongst it.
Yeah, exactly.
And they drive up in the car and say, "Oh, who are you? Oh, we're from Pacific Pharmaceuticals.
Exactly.
Kong is our spokesperson."
And just looking completely out of place.
Yeah.
Well, something I want to go back from, one of the jokes about the pharmaceutical company I love, is when Mr. Taco is informed that he has illegally smuggled King Kong into the country, and thus is responsible for any damages. I love the sort of corporate nonsense involved in that decision.
Yeah, see, I think I said to you during the film, I really like that angle that, okay, you've not got a permit to bring this into the country.
No.
You're smuggling what is essentially a dangerous animal into the country.
Well, that's the thing. That's where the comedy angle really works on making points like this and and being satirical. It's sort of talking about, well, because I think the point this film makes with the Godzilla versus King Kong situation is how exacerbated it is.
Yeah.
How much of this is literally the fault of Mr. Taco and the pharmaceutical representatives.
Well, that's what I was going to say to you.
They brought Godzilla to Japan.
Exactly. I was going to say this to you, but you've picked it up already. I was going to say, what do you think is the overarching thing that this film pokes fun at, is satirising? And it's, of course, the ridiculousness of advertising and advertising companies and commercialism as a whole. The very nature of it within this film brings these two monsters together. And like you said, the situation just gets more and more
ridiculous.
Yeah, it just gets more and more ridiculous and out of hand. And it reaches the point where literally the military's plan is bring the monsters together and hopefully they'll kill each other.
And they'll just duke it out themselves.
Let them fight.
Hence the title. And someone goes as far to almost say the title, or did they say an exact...
It's when Taco dives into his cupboard to change his outfit and he comes out in his explorer gear and he says, "King Kong versus Godzilla. I'd buy that idea." Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah. And
you have one of the girls in the office literally turns to someone else and goes, "Hey, which one do you think is stronger?" And I'm sort of like, well, you just asked the question that I, the viewer, have been wondering.
And thus 50 years of fandom wars were born.
Exactly. Well, that's what I want to talk about as well, is that what I knew about Godzilla going in was always, Godzilla shows up, he either destroys Tokyo or he fights other monsters. Yeah. So I was actually really, really excited to see what is the first of the formal Godzilla versus other creatures.
Yeah, because he does fight Anguirus and Godzilla again, but it's not the focus of the film. Like we mentioned in the last one, the fight with Anguirus comes in the middle of the film, not the end, it's not the climax. So no, you're right. And this is the first one with verses in the title, of which there are many.
Which was fun to see. And I think just because it's literally a versus film, and everything that comes with that to me is a little bit of fun, a little bit of frivolity, and I think even though it is a versus film, which was my sort of natural bias to hear that and go, oh, well, it'll just be two monsters fighting then, won't it? I was just so surprised and so happy that there was loads to enjoy in this film.
The story wrapped around it is really fun. I mean, it's the human characters are just as watchable as the monsters, and just seeing them run around.
And admittedly, they are much more comic, and there's far less tragedy and sort of emotional attachment to them. By no means is there a dark sort of the relationship in this film. I don't care about half as much as I do about Dr. Serizawa's and Emiko's. So I want to be able to say it. The relationship in King Kong versus Godzilla, I don't care half as much about as I did about Dr. Serizawa's.
Fumiko and Fujita.
Between them and Dr. Serizawa and Emiko. But saying that, I'm invested in the sort of comedy and where the plot is going to go next and what next ridiculous turn the film is going to take.
I agree. But what going back to what you were saying, like it's a versus film. It's like that just sounds fun. It's King Kong versus Godzilla. It's a really literal title. You know what you're getting going into it, and the film does deliver. But this does sort of begin, not really a trend, but sort of a tradition in titles, that when two characters from separate franchises cross over, you'll get a versus, like Freddy versus Jason, or Alien versus Predator.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
You could argue that dates back to 1943, I think, in which Frankenstein meets the Wolfman came out, but it's not really in the same vein as these films. And
did they just hang out?
Have a couple of beers and
a couple of briskies. I've not seen this film.
Talk about their feelings.
Exactly.
Like Dudu versus Dudu.
Yeah, exactly. Which is a lot of fun.
And like I said, like the title is really literal. You know what you're getting, and it's you probably won't be surprised when I say this, but this film is still the most financially successful Godzilla film.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Still, yeah.
Wow. I wouldn't have suspected that, but at the same time, if it's not the original Godzilla, I really couldn't have guessed which one it would have been. That's a surprise.
Out of Toho's cycle.
Right, okay,
Toho's 28 films, this one is still the highest grossing.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I think it deserves that.
Yeah, it makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. It was a Godzilla film, and it was a King Kong film. Were there any other Godzilla sequels? Were there any other King Kong sequels?
Toho made another Kong film.
Oh, really?
In 1967, called King Kong Escapes, or in Japanese, King Kong no Gyakushu, King Kong's Counterattack. But it's not a sequel to this, and the Kong in it is better.
Yeah,
but it's still not
as good.
Right.
Well, there you go.
But after this, there's just really kind of Kong remakes, like the 1976 King Kong remake and its sequel King Kong Lives, and then Peter Jackson's Kong remake of 2005.
Obviously,
and Skull Island is coming up now.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Which will be interesting to see. But obviously, you mentioned there's an American remake of this film, which we'll get to just before we quickly wrap up the plot.
Yes,
which there isn't much to do. Essentially, now the comatose King Kong, who has had too much red berry juice, the naughty little man that he is airlifted by balloons and that insane
super strong
wire, and lifted in the most ridiculous pose I've ever seen, with one leg out, like he's about to do the crane kick, which is so funny. Every time it cut to that, it was just really, really, really funny. And
it's not a great model.
It's not.
Toho's models were 99% great. This one is not.
Then they drop him off on Mount Fuji.
He smashes into Godzilla and they tumble down the side of the...
Again, like a drunk man. Oh, excuse me. Go away. And then they proceed to fight very quickly.
And, okay, here's an aspect. So at one point in the fight, Kong is rendered unconscious. He smacks his head into a boulder, the silly sausage that he is. And Godzilla keeps lobbing boulders on him and like hurting him more and more, until Sakurai and Fujita, who are observing the fight via helicopter, say, "Oh, there's thunderclouds up ahead. This will help Kong." And Fujita's kind of as confused as we are, going, "Wait, what the fuck?" It's like lightning will revive Kong. So hinted at before when he's biting at the electricity wires, and he seems to kind of be absorbing the
it's
electricity.
It's blasting him away.
It's not totally stated. And at the start of the film, Kong's arrival is heralded by thunder and lightning. But so finally it's revealed that this Kong, Toho's Kong, the Kaiju Kong,
it's a Thunder Kong,
can harness the power of electricity.
Yeah.
Your take on that?
That was a closing gambit for the film. Well, yeah, no, that was unexpected. Obviously, Steven explained to me later that this isn't considered a canon for King Kong, which obviously kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of fun to give King Kong electricity powers. Obviously, it makes no sense, but it does level the playing field a little bit.
It does.
You have ice versus electricity. Ice versus electricity is always it's a strange fight. But no, I think that clearly evens the playing field for a little bit. They fight a little bit more.
Godzilla's breath isn't nice.
Is it not?
No.
Is it not?
It's meant to be like atomic.
Oh, of course it is.
Atomic
Excuse
fire,
me.
yeah.
Well, that's fine.
Yeah.
Keep that in. Leave it in. My learning experience. No, you don't have to. We'll just jump back onto the sort of end of the fight then.
Yeah. So so Kong is revived by the power of electricity and lightning, leveling the playing field, and so he uses his newfound
Thunder fists.
Thunder fists, to beat the crap out of Godzilla
For a while,
and until the two of them tumble off a cliffside into the ocean with all of our, like you mentioned in the previous couple of films, a huge big crowd shot.
Yeah.
With all our collected cast of characters looking over the ocean and saying, "Oh, who's gonna win?" We see something swimming away, and then finally Kong rises, and let Kong go back to his island. He probably misses his home, and he swims off, and we get a little spiel from Akihiko Hirata about we should learn from plants and animals and learn to respect them, and in turn respect each other. That's all I have to say. He literally says that, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Oh, that's all I have to say. Final line of the film. But this brings me on to the ending. You know, King Kong versus Godzilla. What's your first question? Who wins?
Who wins?
I mean,
who won?
There is an urban legend about this film.
Is there now?
Perpetuated by an old and out-of-date edition of Trivial Pursuit. Funnily enough. The question's something like, who wins in the Japanese version of King Kong vs. Godzilla, or the American equivalent, or something like, true or false, Godzilla wins in the Japanese version, Kong wins in the American version. Just perpetuating the rumour that there are two versions of the film which feature two different endings. One with Godzilla rising victorious and one with Kong rising victorious. It's complete bullshit.
Right, okay.
It is complete crap.
So you're saying Kong all the way?
Kong does win, yeah. Hashtag Team Kong.
Hashtag Team Kong.
In both versions, the Japanese version and the edited American version, King Kong emerges victorious from the water and swims off.
Right.
The only difference is, in the Japanese version, as the end title appears on screen, we hear both Godzilla and Kong's roars.
Right.
In the American version, if I remember correctly, we only hear Kong's roar.
Okay.
That is the only difference.
Right.
So it's complete crap.
Okay, that makes sense, yeah. I wish I'd known that rumour so that you could dispel it for me personally, but I didn't know that.
It's difficult though because they don't really frame Kong as the hero monster as much as they do just an underdog. And I suppose the underdog has to win.
Exactly. Well, that's the thing I was about to say, is that it makes sense to me that King Kong wins, even though it is part of the Godzilla franchise and it is King Kong versus Godzilla.
Yeah.
It makes sense to me that Godzilla would win. that King Kong would win, because where else is he going to win? Yeah. He certainly doesn't win in his own movie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm kind of glad that he won here.
Yeah, and
he deserved it.
He does deserve it. He fought well, even though he got his ass handed to him quite a lot.
And he was completely undermatched, except for the Thunder Fists.
But yeah, there we
go. That's the end of the film. What did we learn? Treat plants and animals with respect. That's all I have to say.
So Ross, as we've enjoyed discussing and you've enjoyed hearing about in the previous two, Godzilla and Godzilla Raids Again, when King Kong vs. Godzilla was exported to American shores, things happened to it.
What happened, Stephen? Tell me.
So glad you asked. Well, in layman's terms, the usual shit happened. New scenes added in with American actors, music replaced, edits done, things taken out of order and rearranged, but aside from completely replacing Akira Ifukube's score,
oh no,
the biggest crime of the US version is a fundamental misunderstanding of the Japanese original, and they play it serious.
Oh no, that's bad. That's not good.
They with the exception of the Mr. Taco character,
okay. Yeah,
they try and play it dead serious.
It's not really a film that you can play serious. You can't keep playing it serious like that.
And whether it's a denial of the fact that it was a comedy or they didn't realise it was a comedy, it
doesn't matter.
They tried to play it. They tried to play it straight, and it doesn't work. Because I totally get like what Woody Allen did with What's Up, Tiger Lily. You can take parts of a drama and subvert them and edit them so that it can be fashioned into a comedy. But that you can't do the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. And that was also slightly different because it was attempting to make a new film, essentially.
Exactly, yeah.
Which you shouldn't really be trying to do if you're making a film, the same sort of film for just a different audience. You should attempting to rescue as much of the original film as you can.
Exactly. So as I said, they tried to play it straight. It didn't work. And for some reason, they completely discarded Akira Ifukube's wonderful score.
Yeah, no, the score in that film is absolutely wonderful.
They instead inserted stock soundtrack cues from The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Oh.
Which is it's a good film in its own right, but
it doesn't belong there.
It's not got an iconic sound. So the new scenes, they take the form of a broadcast from the United Nations News Centre, where an American newscaster by the name of Eric Carter tells us what's happening in the film.
Excellent.
Just tells us.
That's what I needed to know.
And it takes place in this TV station, and we get relays to Japan, and we get guest professors coming in to explain what the monsters are up to and their biology and this sort of thing. And oh my god, it's charming in a way, but at the same time it's not, because to me it ruins the film. And this version does have its fans, but it's just it makes it boring. And that's really a crime when we're talking about this film. To make this film boring.
Yeah, because that's the thing. I don't think this film is boring at all. I thought King Kong vs. Godzilla was like riveting to watch. I thought it was interesting. It held my attention for the whole film.
Okay, here's an example. Right. Here's a really good example of how they fundamentally misunderstood the film and the tonal shift that they inflicted on it.
Go for it.
The opening scene, in the Japanese version, we have a really, really, really eerie narration over a rotating Earth. And you said, it makes you think they're going for a really apocalyptic tone, when suddenly someone interrupts it, like stops the Earth from spinning and says, "Excuse me for a second. Here's a thing."
Bill Nye basically shows up.
In the Japanese, in the US version, they play that straight.
Oh no.
They do not have the person coming in and stopping the globe from spinning and saying, "Oh, excuse me." They retain the shot of the slow zoom on the rotating Earth. You know what they replace it with?
What?
"There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy." They put that Shakespeare quote in and cut just before the gentleman would have
scientist, yeah.
So to me, that's the mission statement when they edited the film.
We're going to be really boring.
And
that's
I can only imagine. Jeff Goldblum tells a story that he remembers seeing this film in like a packed theatre with like kids just losing their minds over it and like really excited to see this film. I can only imagine kids being bored out of their minds watching the US version because it stops the film down to a halt. Whenever something happens, we cut back to United Nations reporter Eric Carter with the news. The world is stunned today to find out the existence of prehistoric monsters. Stop. It's really... The US version is famous for a ridiculous scene in which Professor Science comes in and is explaining how the minds of Kong and Godzilla work and what's their thought process.
What's their motivation?
Brains. And they say he brings out like a little marble, like a little red marble or something. He says, Godzilla has a brain about this size. He is sheer brute force, whereas Kong is a thinking animal. And it's like...
That's the opposite.
What are you doing, guys?
That's... Yeah, no, that... Yeah.
It's really a shame because I'll admit, I don't think, even in its original Japanese version, I don't think King Kong vs. Godzilla is the film it could have been. And do I think it's the best cinematic depiction of these two icons meeting on screen and fighting? I don't really. Honestly, I don't really. There's a lot of improvements I would make to this film. And I've spoken about the changes. I'm not saying to call them improvements is presumptuous. Changes I would make to this film if I could. I've talked about that at length before in the Kaijusaurus blog. I'll put a link to it in the show notes and I'll show you as well. It would just be a couple of little things just to tighten up the film. Like, for example, make it a fucking sequel.
Yeah.
Like, incorporate King Kong into the canon. Make Faroe Island Skull Island.
Yeah.
Have Fumiko along on the expedition, thus justifying why Kong is interested in her later.
Yeah, exactly. Well, because that's the thing. It was a matter of time, it felt, before they used the Kong climbs up a building and grabs a woman shot, and it was just like, okay, they're doing that. They've done that because that's what happens in the first.
Yeah, it was definitely
in
homage, but like, they should have just. That's what I would do. Like, have Fumiko work for Pacific Pharmaceuticals and have her along on the expedition,
just to make that a little more relevant.
But yeah, just talking about the original Kong again and like how disappointing the Kong in this film is. It's doubly disappointing because King Kong is the film which inspired Eiji Tsuburaya to get into special effects and to get into film in general. Mm-hmm. And apparently there's really lovely stories about him during the war because he would have even then, he couldn't have been in active service. He was involved in the Japanese war effort, but not in active service. But he would help children, he would shelter children.
Really?
And he would, like, in the middle of bombing raids, etc., he would regale children and comfort them with like stories about King Kong.
Oh,
and
wow.
Apparently it was always his dream to work on a film about King Kong, a King Kong film. And I think his Kong ends up looking like this.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost heartbreaking when you hear it like that.
No, don't put it like that. That's upsetting.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of the Kong costume, but at the same time, I did like seeing it. I thought it was. It's difficult to describe, but although I didn't think it was a very good costume, I was sort of mesmerised by it throughout the film. So it wasn't a huge turn off for me because it was doing something in a very weird level for me.
And the Kong's just it's like its arms change length all the time, and like
his bouldering is not particularly effective at any point.
Like I said to you, I really think this Kong, it looks more like a chimp than a gorilla, and that's
damning praise, damning comments.
I mean that's fine, I guess, but King Kong isn't a chimp.
No, he's not. He's a Kong.
Exactly. He's a mega primatus Kong.
Cheers. So the very last thing I want to say about this film, which is touching very briefly on how good the score is. Really loved the score. Thought it was absolutely wonderful. But as you guys all know, I'm very new to these films and this was my first time watching it. And if I'm right, the sort of theme for Godzilla, yeah, that's its first appearance in this film.
Yes.
Because I know that as the song that Sam Rockwell dances to in one of the Charlie's Angels films. Because there's not a remix of it, it's sampled in a song, it's called Simon Says. I just know that, it's a song. I can't remember the artist, but it's used as a sample in like a rap song, and it's a good song. It's a very good song.
I think I know the song you mean. Yeah.
Woo woo. Yeah. And you know what? I love that song, and it was great to hear it properly as well. But I love them both.
Well, yeah, that's Godzilla's theme. That theme.
Will that come back?
It's like it's up there with the Raiders March.
Yeah, like it is a fantastic theme. It feels like Godzilla.
And as the series progresses, the theme begins to be teased. Like the theme will kick in and it'll tease the appearance of Godzilla.
Good.
Like it'll really slow burn it. Like.
Good.
And it recurs in more films than it doesn't.
Right, okay, that's good. Because I think it's a great
even
thing.
in films that Ifukube didn't score.
Yeah, it's borrowed and used again. Well, that's good, because I really like that music.
And the score in this is wonderful, as you said. Like these really bombastic military marches. I really love the track that's played when I think it's called the plan to the plan to lift King Kong, something like that. And it just kicks in when they say, "Okay, let's go," and it's no, that's wrong. And it just really kicks in when they begin the operation to lift Kong, and it's just a really great, rousing little military march. I in my head, I've always referred to Ifukube's music as like something in a situation, in a hypothetical situation where like humanity has to defend the Earth. You want to be scored by Ifukube.
Absolutely.
Like, you want Ifukube backing you up. Like Akira Ifukube's music was like. Music to defend the Earth by the best of Akira Ifukube.
You should put that on the back of the album.
So, Ross, you've clearly enjoyed this film quite a bit. Despite its shortcomings.
Yeah, and I agree. Or for the most part, I can absolutely see where you're coming from and your feelings about it.
It's just a few little. It's a few little instances where I feel like laces have come undone, and I want to tie them back up.
Yeah, exactly. Like as I said, I don't think. Obviously, this film is as good as the original. I think I enjoyed it much more than Godzilla Raids Again. And myself, just personally as a viewer, I'm an actor as well, so I love comic touches. I really appreciate comic acting, and if I see an actor doing just a well-performed, clearly well thought about comic performance, and I'm just much more inclined to be invested in that. I love good performances. I love to see interesting characters. And I love the just sort of comic turns and sort of ridiculous situations this movie throws out. So this movie kept my attention and just kept me really interested by being weird and interesting and much more satirical than some of the other Godzilla films. And so my takeaway was that it, again, continued to open the number of possibilities that Godzilla films, the shape under which Godzilla films can take. It feels like they can be anything, and I'm sure the more that we watch, there are going to be some other interesting films that go in some other strange directions. So really, it just has made me more excited for the next film and where we'll be going with that.
Well, I'll just put a pin in that for 1 second.
Tease me.
As we do, I'll now relate to you how this film is perceived within the fandom, within how it's generally received, to see how its general perception and reception, if it chimes with how you've received the film. Well, you probably know this film is really warmly received in the fandom. Like, certainly people do have issues with it, and I've echoed those. But as with any Godzilla film, people have their issues with it. So, yeah, this film is generally very well received. Funnily enough, though, I mentioned to you earlier that Toho retained the Japanese distribution rights to their version. And Universal now has, I believe, worldwide, for the US version. Toho might have East Asian distribution rights as well, but I'm not totally sure off the top of my head. I'll post it in the show notes. But so really, the Japanese version is relatively unseen outside of Japan.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of fans still say, I've only seen the US version.
Really?
Because that's available on DVD and Blu-ray. Even in this country, that version's available.
Right. And how did we watch this film, Steven?
Well, yeah, we watched it on a bootleg. And
but yeah.
And it's really a shame because the Japanese original cut is just leagues ahead of anything the US version can ever hope to be. And I would honestly freaking kill for
a proper...
Yeah, for the Japanese version to get like a really nice photochemical restoration of its original elements and just have it on like an English subtitled Blu-ray with like piles of extras that explain the background and the production of the film. And like a freaking commentary is not too much to ask. Yeah, we'll do Kaijusaurus commentaries.
Exactly.
Anyway, so thank you for listening, everyone. You can find us on SoundCloud, the Kaijusaurus Podcast. You can also find us on kaijusaurus.tumblr.com, the blog from which this podcast originated, and the blog also where I post all the show notes and links and other relevant reading that we may have mentioned through the episode. So do please check that out, kaijusaurus.tumblr.com.
Well, I was going to say as well, hello listeners, let's chat directly. I have a Twitter, ROSSMENZO, Roz Menzies. If you want to chat.
If you want to chat. I also have a Twitter, at Steven Scrivello. You can hit us up at any time with any questions you have. And that brings us on to the subject of the next podcast.
What's next?
Well, next we have the introduction into the Godzilla series of another very famous movie monster who previously starred in her own standalone movie. Next time on the Kaijusaurus Podcast, Ross and I will be reviewing 1964's Mothra versus Godzilla. So, if you like, please send us your thoughts, opinions, questions on that film. Anything you think about the film, anything you think is interesting you've observed about it, any questions you have for myself, any questions you have for Ross, any observations you want to hear from Ross. Please go ahead to kaijusaurus.tumblr.com/ask. Ask us anything, even if it's just feedback. Do you like the podcast? Do you hate it? Hit us up with anything, seriously.
Or personal questions.
Not
too personal.
Feel free to get weird.
Yeah, exactly.
Once again, everyone, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure. And thank you, Ross.
Thank you. Thank you as well, the listener.
Goodbye.
Cheerio.